Today is October 29th, 2008. We're meeting today with Mr. Al Stevens at his home in Loveland, Colorado. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for the Northern Colorado Veterans History Project. Welcome, Al, and thanks for participating in the project today. Let's start out, if we could, tell us a little bit about yourself, your date of birth, where you were born, a little bit about your family.
Oh, well, I was born January the 7th, 1926 in Longmont. And at that time we lived out at Mead. My dad was on a farm with my grandfather. And we lived there for till I was about 5 years old, I guess. And my dad got double pneumonia, they called it back in them days. And the doctor told him he was going to have to get off the farm. He just couldn't stay there anymore. So we moved into the town of Longmont. And my dad eventually got a job with the light department in the city of Longmont, and we moved up to Lyons. And he worked as on the hydroelectric light plant there. And we spent 5 years up there. Then we moved back to Longmont, and by that time I'd got through the 8th grade in school, and I went into high school then.
There in Longmont?
Yeah, and then I went through the first grade and up to what is it? Your second grade or second year of high school.
Sophomore.
And I got to working at night into a machine shop, and I was making parts for tanks. And I went to a machinist school across the street from that, where they were making these parts. And one of my buddies and I decided one day we were going to go to Denver, and we were going to join the Navy, and we were going to win the war.
Now this was the war had already broken out then.
That's right.
At this point.
This was in 1943.
43. Now, do you remember where you were and what you were thinking when you first heard that Pearl Harbor had been bombed?
Well, it was. I was still in high school
right.
then, yeah, and it was something that you had to think about.
Sure.
And that's why I thought maybe joining the Navy, and I'd always wanted to be in the Navy because my dad was in the First World War in the Army, and I've heard him tell about sitting in foxholes and crawling in the mud. If I was going to have to go, I wasn't going to go into the Army. I wanted to go into the Navy.
Sure.
where I could be where it was wet or something, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, my buddy and I went down to Denver, and his name started with a G and mine started with an S, so we got separated. And when we got all through in that, and I held up my hand and was sworn in, I ran into him, and he said he didn't make it.
Oh, is that right?
And I didn't know what I was going to do then, because there I was all by myself, and I'd signed up and swore in and signed the paperwork, and I was caught. So anyway, I went home, and I told my folks what I had done, because they didn't know that I had gone to Denver to do this. And my mother said, well, I won't sign the papers. And
oh, you weren't 18 at that point yet?
Yeah. No, I was still 17.
Oh, okay.
So I told my mother, unfortunately, I always regretted it, but I told her I didn't have to have her sign the papers. Just my dad, that he did. Excuse me.
That's fine. That's fine.
But I was caught then, so away I went, and I went to boot camp up at Farragut, Idaho.
Now, how long after you had signed your papers before you shipped out?
Just 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
They give me 2 weeks to go home and get my stuff together, which I didn't have anything to get together. So it was just a case of sitting around home until it was time to go to Denver, and they put me on a train, and I went through Longmont and came up through the railroad here in Loveland and on through to Farragut, Idaho.
You remember that day you left? Did your folks see you off that day?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how was that leaving, particularly with your mom's thoughts on the whole thing?
It was tough.
Yeah.
But they drove from Denver to Longmont, and they got, because that's where we live, and they got there to see me on the train there, and then they didn't see me till I come back from boot camp.
Okay. So you took the train up to
Farragut, Idaho.
for your
Yeah.
that's where you got your basic training.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I was there for weeks, and then I came home for 2 weeks, and then I went back to Farragut, and then they shipped me down to California, and I was there 30 days before they sent me to Vallejo, California, and that's where I went aboard the ship, and I was on there for 2 years.
How was that transition from civilian life into military life?
It was different being that young.
Yeah, sure.
You just didn't know what. I had no idea. Things happened so fast, and there was so much to do that you really didn't think about what tomorrow was going to be. You just today was today, and that was it.
Yeah.
And but there was a good bunch of guys on the ship, and it worked out real well.
How was it? I imagine up to that point in your life, you probably hadn't traveled too far away from home or been away from home. Was that an adjustment? Was there any homesickness or anything in that regard?
Well, like I say, things were happening so fast,
okay.
and you were so busy that you just didn't think about that
Yeah,
too
yeah.
much. And then going out to sea, I'd never been in the ocean
Well,
before.
that's always my next question. Here we've got a boy from landlocked Colorado climbing on, going out to sea. How was that? Did you get your sea legs? How?
Well, I'll tell you what, we took the ship had been in the South Seas, come back to get some repairs, and they got those done when I went aboard, and then we went down to San Francisco, and we had to do some trial runs out of there, and I did fine till we got underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, and I started to get seasick. And I thought I was going to die all the way to Pearl Harbor, and I just couldn't eat anything. If I went by the galley and smelled food, I'd have to run to the rail because I'd throw up.
Is that right?
Yeah, if anybody walked up to me and said pork chop, I'd throw up. And so I just could not keep any food down.
How long of a journey was that from
5 days.
5 days.
Yeah, and I could eat. We didn't have a place big enough to store a lot of our food. So we had like potatoes and stuff that set up on the deck, what we called our after deck house. I could go back there and peel a potato and eat it, and I could hold it down, but I couldn't eat anything that was greasy. So when I got to Pearl Harbor, I told the doctor, I said, you know, I just can't take this. I just can't eat. And he said, I'll tell you what you do. He said, you go over to the PX and you get yourself a malt. And he said, I don't care what color it is, but he said, you drink all of them while we're here. He said, you drink those till it runs out your ears. And he said, we'll go back to sea. And he said, if you continue to be sick like you were coming over, he said, I'll get you on the next ship back to the United States. And he said, I'll see that you don't leave the States, and you'll stay on ground all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you couldn't make me sick after I left Pearl Harbor.
Is that right? It worked,
Yeah,
huh?
it worked.
Huh.
I told people about that, and they don't believe me, but I drank a lot of malts, I can tell you. A lot of guys drank beer, but I drank malts.
Well, now being in Pearl Harbor, this was a couple years after the bombing. Was there still a lot of damage there?
Oh,
or?
yeah, they hadn't done anything to repair any of the ships. No, they were still sunk there. Yeah.
Did that play into your
Oh, you
thoughts
bet.
at all?
It just makes you think, you know,
Yeah.
when you go back out to see whether that's going to happen to you way down there somewhere. And there was times when we'd think about it, when things would get pretty hairy. Why, you'd think about it. But see, our ship was numbered 399. 2 nines is 18, and 3 is 21.
I know, so there's some luck
And
going there.
so we always thought that because we, when we were going to Okinawa, that was the first day of April. A Japanese plane.
Was this your first assignment from
No,
Pearl Harbor?
No. We had done a lot.
Let's start your story
Okay.
from parting out at Pearl Harbor then.
Well, when we went to after Pearl Harbor, we went down to the Kwajalein Islands, and when I was down I stood my watches in the lower level down the engine room, and when we came up, when I come up after my shift, and I looked out, I couldn't believe it. We'd gone into port, and there were ships, I mean, everywhere.
That must have been a sight, huh?
It was just an unbelievable sight. I'd never seen that many ships in one spot before.
Wow.
Well, from there, they sent us all out to different islands to bombard and do what we could shooting into the islands and that to get rid of the Japanese.
Well, now what was the name of your ship and what type of ship were you on?
I was on a destroyer.
Okay.
Yeah, it was an old one. It was what we called a single stacker, and it only had the one vent out of the engine rooms, where most of the more modern ones always had two stacks, but we only had one.
Oh, okay.
And but we went from there on down to Guadalcanal. They had just got to the point of Guadalcanal was ours.
Okay.
We'd taken it back. There were still Japs on there,
Yeah.
but as far as the island was concerned, we had it on our side then. Then we used to go up what they called the Bougainville Slot, and that was where we would try and catch the Japanese trying to come in with submarines at night and pick up their men, because the guys couldn't get off of the islands without getting onto some kind of a ship, and we didn't put up with those ships going into there, and then we tried to get the submarines to keep them from taking them off there. We did quite a bit of that. When we were at Hollandia, New Guinea, we went out of there with a British mine layer, and we went down the coast of New Guinea, probably a couple hundred miles, and into a cove, and we went in at night. And when we went in, then we had another destroyer with us, and we turned and come back out. And as we come back out, the mine layer went in, and he laid that full of mines, so the submarines, when they'd come in there, would run into the mines. So we did stuff like that. The island down in there, the Japanese they couldn't get out of there, and so because we had them nailed into there, and so what the Japanese were doing was coming in at night and picking up their officers and leaving the rest of them, pick up their officers and try and get them to a place where they were needed. And as far as their men is concerned, they just didn't care about them.
Wow.
And they didn't get any food or anything. They just have to live. They were just living off of the island itself and eating coconuts and whatever was available. You know.
What was your responsibility on the ship? What was your main duty?
When I first went aboard it, I was just a seaman. Well, then they found out that I'd had lathe work and that, so they and they made me machinist and put me in the machine shop.
Okay.
In fact, when the war was over, I ended up in charge of the machine shop.
Is that right, on the ship? Yeah. What was life like on the ship as far as eating conditions, sleeping conditions, the food, and such?
Oh, we thought really good cooks aboard our ship, and some of them would tell you different, but you're eating, you could almost tell what day of the week it was by what the galley was cooking. Saturday morning was beans for breakfast and rolls. Wednesday morning was beans and rolls. So if you knew it was during the week, it was Wednesday, because when you went down there, because that's what we had. But for the most part, there was times when I just could not believe that a cook could cook, because our ship was so small. We were only 36 foot wide and 318 feet long, and that from the water line down, the deepest part of our ship was only 14 feet.
Really? Oh,
And
wow.
so it didn't take a very big wave till we were rolling one way or the other, or going up and down this way. And how those guys kept their pots on the stove, I don't know. But there comes times when we got into hurricanes and that we ate K rations, because the cooks couldn't cook.
Yeah.
They couldn't keep a pot on the stove.
Uh,
And that how they did all their baking and stuff like that, I'll have to give them credit. They did a great job.
how big was the crew of the ship, roughly?
We ran usually with between 290 and 300. If we got up to 310, we didn't have room for them to sleep. They had to lay on the deck, because we just didn't have any room for them. So we were pretty small.
Yeah. What were sleeping conditions like? What was your
We had 4 bunks, and usually the first guy, he got the top bunk, and then it was whatever was left you got, and you were assigned a bunk, and you were assigned a locker, and so and then 4 of us would go together and have what we called a laundry bag. So when your clothes got dirty, you put them in the laundry bag. Then one of the guys took them up to where we had a laundry, and they'd get them done. They'd come back, and then they'd throw the clothes out on our bed, and then we'd put them in our locker. But you marked all your clothes. You wrote your name in them with ink that didn't come out, and that's the only way you could keep track of it. Because when you get 4 guys,
Sure.
you wouldn't know whether this was a great big guy or a small guy. So if you had your name on there, that you knew it was yours. Yeah, but the laundry did a lot of. They kept our clothes real clean for us, and there wasn't any problem about getting them done. You just had to take the bag up and throw it in the pile, and when they got time, they washed it. And that was their job. I was a machinist, and they run the laundry.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you do with time in your free time when you weren't on duty? What would you do as far as passing the time away? And
well,
yeah.
we had our we worked 4 on and 4 off. That's when I went. I spent most of my time in the after engine room, and whenever that my 4 hours was up, why then I'd go in during the day. Then I'd go into the machine shop and I'd do lathe work and that for repairs to anything that needed it. And then when the time 4 hours was up, then I went back down below, and you just went back and forth 4 hours, 4 hours, 4 hours, and that's the way you worked.
The way it was chopped up like that, were you able to get enough sleep? I mean, you wouldn't get a full 8 hours of sleep then, would you?
No, you got 4.
And you were able to function with that? There was no
you just got used to doing it. And I'll tell you, when I first went into the engine room, I was the one that went and got the water, cold water, and I took a lot of readings on bearings around through the engine room and that. And my big job, the hardest part of my job when I first came aboard the ship and was in the after engine room, was I had to go wake up the guys to replace those guys. And the guys that tell you, go away from me, I don't want to get up, you know. And if you didn't get that guy down there, the guy that he was relieving would get upset with you.
Oh, geez.
And
you're caught in the middle
there was times. So when I had been on the ship long enough that I didn't have to do that anymore, that was great. Because that was waking a guy up at 4 o'clock in the morning or at midnight, and they were tired and they just didn't want to get up.
Yeah.
And then there was times that everybody got up, usually every morning at daybreak, because we went to general quarters. That's when the planes would try and get to us.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. And every evening when it started to get dark, we went to general quarters. And we usually stayed there maybe an hour and a half, depending on the location we were in and what we thought the dangers were. You got up and you went on to wherever you were assigned.
And where were you assigned?
I was assigned to Gun 1.
Okay.
And I was at what they called a shellman. Our 538 5-inch guns were in 2 pieces. The shells were in 2 pieces. So what I did was put the powder was the shell was about almost 3 foot long. I would lay that into a train, and then the shellman would lay the projectile in front of it. And then the guy that stood on the back of the gun, he pushed a lever and that went up into pushed it into the gun, and then it fired. And then that thing flew out of there, and you grabbed the next shell and you did it, and you just kept doing that. You didn't even have to see. You went by hearing. You could tell what had happened by the sound of the shell falling into that tray. The shellman knew that it was in there, and then he put a shell in, and then that guy stood there. And we had to be in total dark, because you couldn't have any lights at night. When you were in the restrooms, in shaving, you'd start to shave and the lights would go out. Then they'd come back on and you'd shave a little more and the lights would go out. Anybody that went in and out, the lights automatically went out everywhere. And if you ever got caught smoking on the deck at night, you were in real trouble. I can't prove it, but I've heard that when you puff on a cigarette, somebody on a ship 5 miles away could see that light. Mm. That's on a real dark night.
Right.
So nobody, I don't care who you were, you never smoked outside at night.
Well, what were the conditions like inside that gun? Was it when it went off? Was it pretty loud?
At the back of the gun turret was a spot about maybe almost 2 foot square, that was like a little tunnel. And when that big brass, because that brass was just 5 inches long, when it come flying out of there, it went and hit that, and it bounced out on the deck. And it was noisy, that's for sure.
Wow.
But we stayed one time, we stayed for 13 days. I ate and slept in that gun.
Is that right?
Yeah, we were on patrol up north, and the Jap planes were so thick that we just couldn't, you were at general quarters all the time. And they would give you just a gun at a time, or wherever you were at on the bridge or what, they'd give you maybe 15 minutes to run down, brush your teeth and that in the morning, and come right, go to the bathroom and that, and come right back up and get in that gun. Because you had to be there all the time. Because it took, we had the pointer and the, I can't think of the name of the other one. One had the ability to raise the barrel up and down, and the other one turned the turret.
Okay.
And if we weren't locked into the top of the ship, they could take control and they could train us. What I mean by training, they could do the pointing. But if we were doing it ourselves, why, those guys had the wheels here that they went around with, and that moved it. And then, so we had to have two of those, and we had the two shellmen and the one guy that rammed it in there. So there was 5 of us in that little turret all the time. And we'd take turns holding, listening through the radio. And if they said bogeys 5 miles or 10, 15 miles away, we knew the Japs were coming, the planes. And then they just keep counting, and when they get so close, then we take that headset off and get ready to fire. And then the minute we put them in there, lots of times the guy would put it in and lock it in. Then the bridge was the one that pushed the button to shoot it.
Okay.
And so all we did was load it and keep it loaded. And if we needed to do the pointing, we had the 2 guys to do that too. And but it got pretty noisy in there. Yeah, 5 inches, not a big gun, but it was big enough to make a lot of noise. If you were out on the deck, it'd knock you down. It's the force of that coming out of that barrel.
Did you wear earplugs, right? I mean, if you had...
Yeah. No, we just went.
Wow.
Because when you had general quarters, say that you were, the enlisted men were all slept and everything in the back of the ship, what we call the fantail.
Okay.
And then the officers and that were all up on the front part below the bridge, and that they had their own quarters. So if you were way back and at night, you were sleeping and we had general quarters, you went up one side and down the other. Because if you didn't, it's pitch black. You were running. You couldn't see.
Yeah.
So if you could run with the guy and you know he was right ahead of you, going the same direction you were okay. But if you got over and started the other way, you were bang, 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 and you just it'd knock you down. And we had lifelines alongside of the ship, in about 3 feet from the edge, and because there was places where there wasn't anything to stop you. If you fell down and rolled over, you'd fall over the side.
Oh, geez.
Underneath the torpedo tubes especially. And so you were very careful at night going to general quarters where you're at. Well, I had to go clear up to the front end of the ship, as far up front as anybody did. So you took it pretty easy to get up there. But I don't know, you just got used to doing it, and because we did it every morning, we did it every night in the dark. And there's lots of times we did it during the day. You just never knew.
Yeah.
Anytime our radar picked up what we called bogeys, that was the Japanese planes, anywhere in the air, we went to general quarters just like that. And you stayed there until there was no chance of having a problem or anything. So.
How did you function, particularly when you talk about these long periods of time when you were on general quarters? How do you figure you function? I mean, not only I think it had to be physically straining, but also mentally straining, knowing that you could be attacked at any moment. How do you think you got through those periods of time?
Well, I don't really know. I guess we just did. Yeah. You just got so used to being up today and maybe not here tomorrow. Yeah, but that was the way you lived, because you didn't know what. When I was down in the engine room, The side of our ship was so thin. Uh, well, being in the machine shop, whenever the torpedo man pulled out the torpedoes and put new alcohol in them, then we had to build up the pressure inside of those torpedoes up to 3,500 pounds. So I would go down and run the air compressor for them. And there was a piece of pipe that stuck out about 4 or 5 inches, and it had an elbow on it, and there was another piece stuck up about 2 or 3 inches. That was the side of the ship, and I could take that and move it up and down. That's how thin we were.
Wow, jeez.
And setting down the engine room, lots of times I thought, boy, you know, if a torpedo comes, the side is so thin it might not go off until it got inside and hit something. And I worried about torpedoes more than anything else.
Yeah, oh sure.
See, we had superheated steam that we used, and that run around 600 and some degrees temperature. And if the torpedo ever come through and into the engine room, or a plane, kamikaze plane dove on us and hit in the engine room, and those steam pipes broke, you were cooked before you even knew it.
Oh, jeez.
But I don't know, you just didn't think about it.
Yeah.
And I guess we did think about it, but it didn't bother us. It was just one of the jobs that you did, and it was just part of running the ship. Everybody on the ship had a job, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And they did a good job.
Yeah. I forgot where we'd left off as far as the various missions you were.
Yeah. Well, at least when I got aboard the ship in Guadalcanal, when we got down there,
Okay.
Guadalcanal had just been seized, and we were in, and then I said as we went up through the Bougainville Straits there at night most of the time, because that's when we'd catch the subs coming out and we'd drop depth charges on them. But we'd go, we went from there over into Hollandia, New Guinea, and all up and down the coast, the east coast of New Guinea. We went up and down quite a bit right in that area, because we knew the Japs were still on the island pretty thick, and we were trying to stop them from getting off. And then we went into Guadalcanal, and we practiced there landing troops. And then we took off and went to Lady Gulf. And on the way up there, we picked up a bunch of Army guys aboard our ship, and these guys were tough. I don't know why I have such a But anyway, they took us on the deck, and they told us what to do to kill a Jap if we got ashore. And I hoped above anything that I never had to do that.
Oh, jeez.
But those guys, we took them into the inlet to Lady Gulf one night. We had these Army guys aboard the ship, and they were something like the Green Berets or something like that, I don't remember. But we had about 40 of them aboard the ship. And we took them in at night, and we let them off. And they went on ashore, and they got to a Japanese radar station, and supposedly took it out of condition. But we went in and turned around. As soon as we unloaded them, boy, we got out of there, because they still had, the Japs we hadn't landed troops in Lady Gulf yet.
Oh wow, so this is probably the pre-invasion type of.
Oh yeah.
Oh geez.
We did that a number of different times when we went in strictly on our own.
Oh wow.
But we always came out looking lucky. But then when we took Lady Gulf over, why, we stayed in there because we had the Japanese that came in with their ships and were going to try and get us. So we were a smaller destroyer. Some of the bigger destroyers had more guns than we did, because they had 2 barrels and we only had 1.
Right.
So we stayed in and supposedly protected in Lady Gulf. We stayed in there and protected a communication ship. And the Japs got a hold of one of our torpedo bombers, and they came in there, and we fired at it. As far as I know, we didn't hit it, but we were there protecting that communication ship, because it was a very, very important ship at that time. So we just anchored right there by it. And so if a plane come in, we were going to take the hit before that did, the
Right.
torpedoes or what, you know.
Oh, geez.
And but then we went up to the north end of the islands, past. Well, when you get my age, your memory's not with you.
Oh, that's okay, Al. Don't worry about it.
We went by Manila Bay, why there was a Jap destroyer in there tried to get out, and we had I was told 35 miles of ships,
Is that right?
all in a row,
Wow.
all going up to land the troops, and we had troop carriers with us, and then we had the destroyers protecting them. Well, when that Japanese destroyer started coming out of there, we were designated to fire all the star shells. We fired those up, and then they paired the shell exploded, and then it worked like a parachute come down, and it just lit up everything.
Okay.
So all 4 of our guns, that's all we did was fired over the top of that until our ships, our other destroyers and that went in and sunk it. But that was in Manila Bay there.
Wow.
Then we went on up and we landed troops, and we went into the bay. Well, we would go in first, and we were right. In fact, our screws would dig up mud. We'd get so close to the shore, and then we had the cruisers behind us, and then the wagons or the battleships out behind that. And where we were in so close, what we did, we could see the guys, the Army guys, walking along, and every once in a while you'd see them drop down right quick. Well, we knew they were being fired on, so they would call over to us, and then we would fire into a location and try and stop whoever was firing at them.
Okay.
And we had they had tanks, and the minute they fired, they moved, and boy, it was hard to catch them little buggers, because the minute that they fired, we were going to fire at them.
Right.
So when we seen that shell or heard that shell coming or seen where it came from, boy, we were on it right now. But they would move enough to where our shells, when they hit, didn't bother them. But we stayed in there for quite a while. But the cruisers and the wagons stayed out far enough, they would just fire over the top of us. And if you'd happen to be in one of the hatches that opened up, when the battleships would fire, you could feel, when they went over the top of us, you could feel the air go down,
Yes,
and then you
right.
could feel it come back up. That's just how big. See, they weighed 2,700 pounds, that
Wow.
shell.
Wow.
And when they went off, the coconut trees and everything just went all directions.
Oh, that must have been something. to
Then
see.
we had the planes, the carriers were off, and the planes would come in, and they were drop bombing too. And we just literally tore that place apart. When we quit, there wasn't a tree standing or anything. It's just, you just can't believe how those guns can tear things apart.
Wow. Is that how you kind of found were you close enough at Guadalcanal when you first went there? Could you see the damage from the?
Trees, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Gosh, we went to some islands. Well, we went into one place, and I can't remember the name of the island right now,
Mhm.
but there was a smokestack on there. And they did a lot of, there's a lot of sulfur in that water down there.
Okay.
That's what makes your wake so white. And that's what the planes would dive at, where that wake was starting. That's where they come down
Gotcha.
and tried to drop their bombs, because they knew that you were going in that direction.
Right.
But we went in, and the island had been just literally torn apart. But yet here was this smokestack sticking up in the middle of it, and that's where they were making phosphorus. And so we went in there, and we fired till we destroyed that thing and tore it all up, so that if we left it, they couldn't manufacture any more of
Right,
that stuff.
right.
Know.
Right.
But we did a lot of odd stuff, and we worked with the carrier. When I first went aboard, we did a lot with the carriers, and then they put us in what they called the 3rd Amphibious, and that's when we started landing troops. And when we'd go in practically right on the shore, while those guys were coming to shore in their boats and that, we were trying to protect them from getting shelled off of guns on the shore, you know. And but the carriers, oh, we've seen a lot of them. We'd passed the word that we were going to pick up bogeys, and that's when our planes had come back. And if they came back and and they'd come back in droves. And some guys would get back earlier because they'd already dropped all their bombs. And they'd get back and they'd do all kinds of funny things, and they're playing around us. And if a guy'd come back all shot up and knew that he couldn't get it down on the deck,
Right.
then he'd come by and stand up in the seat and go like this. And he was going to come around again, and when he come around again, he was going to crash into the water. So well, you picked a bad day for me.
That's fine.
Anyway, we had guys that would put on like a vest on with a hook in the back, and they'd dive over, and when they'd get to the plane, if the guy got out of the plane, they would get him and pull him back to the ship, and then we'd go alongside the carrier and get him so he could get him into the hospital, because usually they were shot up, or
Wow.
one guy, just his whole chin was cut open. Some guys we never did get.
Hmm.
Yeah, the first person I seen that I in the war was a guy that was trying to get out of the seat of the plane, and he couldn't get out. And we just watched him sink, and
Oh, geez.
that was it. And boy, that was hard to take, because you knew he was still alive when he went under the water and couldn't get out. But anyway, we would take, when we were operating with the carriers, we had a destroyer every 3,500 feet in a circle around them. And I'll tell you, you stayed in your 35 feet, because we had on the ship, you had your, well, when I first went aboard the ship, I stood, I went up on the bridge, and I got to steer the ship during when it wasn't bad.
Uh-huh.
If we got into a problem and went to general quarters, then there was a quartermaster come in and he took over, because he was more qualified,
Sure.
I guess, to run the ship. But I really liked the bridge. But there were just, whenever we get into a problem, why I'd go down and be back into gun one again. And I was in gun one the whole time I was on the ship.
Is that right? Yeah.
For little over 2 years, yeah.
Huh.
And, but anyway, there was times it got pretty nasty, but for the most part, gosh, we'd get in nice weather, you know, and you just, lots of times if you didn't have anything to do, you just sat around the deck and talked to guys, and there just wasn't anything to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And my mother, I just didn't write home very often.
That was my usually a question I like to ask. How was communications back and forth, particularly with
Poor.
you guys on the move all the time?
Well, I got a little article that you're sitting on right there. We never shut our engines off one time for 82 days.
Is that right?
We never stopped. And when we'd go alongside of the bigger ships and take on fuel, and we'd take on food, because we couldn't carry enough food. And as soon as we got our supplies aboard, then we cut right off and went back into our line again, our 3,500 foot. And that's just the way we went. And I was just looking through some of my stuff there. It said it was the one time that we never stopped for 82 days.
Wow.
So, but you know, when I went, in the 2 years I was down the South Sea Island, I got ashore just off of Guadalcanal in an island once. I got ashore at Hollandia, New Guinea once. And those were the only 2 times I was off the ship.
Is that
The
right?
rest of the time I was on the ship all the time.
What were those 2 times like? I mean, here's once again
Well-
a boy from Colorado that probably hadn't traveled too far away
Yeah,
from home,
yeah.
and now he's in these exotic locations. What was that like?
Well, there wasn't anything to do when you went over on shore. And we in the machine shop, we made a lot of knives in there. I had a officer that he would, we'd get, when we'd go alongside a seaplane or a destroyer tender, we'd get more tools and stuff that we needed. And he'd get boxes of files. He'd take those files and he'd put them in a vise, and then he'd hit them with a hammer. If he couldn't break them, he'd make a knife out of them. And the whole entire time that I was on that ship, I never was out without my knife on my side.
Is that right? Yeah.
Because if I ever got ashore, I wanted something to help protect me.
Sure, you bet.
And times when we did get ashore at Tulagi, just off of Guadalcanal, we were told not to take our knives over with us because they would send a couple of cases of beer with us, and they were afraid the guys would get drunk and start fighting and
Right.
kill
Okay.
each other.
Yeah.
So with our clothes, you took your knife right here and you taped it to your leg. And even at Vallejo, California, I've gone over to bars and stuff like that, and that knife was always on my leg. I never went anywhere without a knife. In fact, I got that knife down the basement right now.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. But there wasn't a guy on the ship, I don't think, that didn't carry a knife with him 24 hours a day. You know. And we never got to use it, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But those Army fellas I was telling you about, they said if you could ever sneak up in back of him, to take that knife and just shove it right down his shoulder, right here, and just pound it in there as hard as you could. And they said that would put him out of commission to the point that you could let him drop and go again. But thank goodness we didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
We, when we were going through the islands at, anyway, we went some places where I could throw a rock across off the ship from one side to the other. It was that narrow.
Wow.
Well, we got in there, and for some reason, somebody got the word that the Japanese were in there with their two-man torpedoes.
Oh,
and
geez.
we dropped 28 depth charges right through there, and we don't know if we ever caught them or killed them, but because you couldn't turn around and go back and look.
Yeah.
But we dropped 28 charges at one time. You know. They
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about asbestos now. Our ship inside was totally covered with asbestos, and whenever we drop depth charges, depending on the depth, if we were shooting them shallow, which we did then, the back end of the ship would just come up and shake like this and then drop back in the water because
And that asbestos would just.
I had a top bunk for a long time, and if that ever happened, the first thing you did was start sweeping the asbestos off
And
the
of course,
top.
back then they had no idea how.
Oh no, they
how-
didn't know it was dangerous
Yeah.
then.
Oh,
but-
jeez.
Yeah, so there was a lot of things that could.
Well, then where from? I think we kind of left off. You were leaving the Philippines. Where did you guys go then from the Philippines?
Well, from the Philippines, we went to Lady Gulf,
Okay.
and we would always have to go back someplace where the Army was training, getting off of their ships and getting all of their guys into boats and that, and we would just stand off from that.
Okay.
And to just find out what we were going to do. Then when they said, okay, we're ready to go, then we had to surround them to keep the submarines away again, and that's what we worked with more than anything else, worried about more than anything
sure,
else was then. And so then we would go into an island somewhere and land those troops. And then when they got cemented in to where they didn't need us out there to fire in for them, then we'd go out and go back and train some more somewhere. So we did a lot of that. So we were on the move all the time. Then when we went into Guam, we had what they call a flotilla. It was four ships like ours, and we went on the west side of Guam, and we had the Commodore aboard our ship, and he was in charge of that flotilla. So we went around first, and we made a huge, great big circle. And every time we come by, there'd only be one destroyer would go by at a time, and we'd take one gun at a time, and all we did was just bang, 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 bang into the shore. And then we'd go out, and the next one would come in and bang, 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 bang. And we did that for hours on top of hours, all night long. We would just go by one ship, and just we didn't even know what we were hitting. We were just shooting over there to keep the Japs up. Well, we did that for two days and 2 nights, and so only one, like I said, only one gun would fire at a time, so we weren't really wasting the shells.
Yeah.
All we were doing is keeping them awake.
Okay.
And when we made one pass by, all of a sudden this searchlight came on. Well, we were so close to shore, if I'd have had a newspaper, I could have read it sitting on the deck.
Yes.
And you talk
Oh,
about
geez.
you talk about guys getting below deck. I mean, everybody went in a hurry because we thought, sure, right behind that light was the shells were coming in
Yeah.
on top of us, and they never did fire a shell on us. I don't know why, but I guess they were just looking to see who was out there. But but I'll tell you what, I got below deck, but I don't know what being below deck would have done us.
Yeah.
You know, because you might as well stayed above and grabbed your life jacket and jumped over the side, because if it had hit us, we'd sunk pretty easy.
Yeah.
But we were the first ship to fire on Guam when we took it back. And then we went up to Saipan, which was just north of there. In fact, after we got through doing all of this round and around firing, then we stayed on patrol because some of the Japanese were trying to get off of the south side of one of the islands, and there was a guy building a house. And every time we went by, he'd run down his ladder and he'd get away from the house, and we'd go on by. We didn't do anything to it, and we could watch him. And as soon as we got by, he'd go up his ladder and he'd start going up his house again. Then we'd go down maybe 4 or 5 miles. We'd turn around and come back, and that's all we did, is went back and forth along this bottom of this island. And every time we went by, he would come down and go back up, and I'm sure he was wished we'd leave so he could get his house built. But it was an area that there was no fighting on or anything, and he was building a house. But there was some funny things once in a while. But we did go up, being in the machine shop, when we put our gig in the water. I don't know if you know what a gig is.
I don't. You can explain it too.
Okay, a gig is what we called our longboat, and it had an engine in the center of it. And then we had two seamen. One of them had the handle on the back, and he guided it. And then we had the one guy on the front that threw the lines over when we tied up to something.
Okay.
Well, lots of times if I wasn't on duty in the engine room and I was in the machine shop, and we put that in the water, because an officer wanted to go over to something, or the captain wanted to go do something, why I usually end up running the engine. And I don't know, it was one of those things, we had a bell, and the coxswain on the back, he had this little rope. Well, if he rang it once, that was a go ahead. If he rang it twice, that was to back up, and so on. So you just sat there, and whatever the bell rang, you went forward or speeded up or slowed down. You had to remember what all the bells meant. But we were still fighting on the island, and evidently the captain, for some reason, had got information that he had to go to one of the other ships to do something. But anyway, we took off, and we got fired on from shore with rifles. Geez. And I'll tell you, we turned around and headed back to our ship in a hurry. When them lead started hitting that water, we took off right now. That's the closest probably I come to getting shot.
Wow. During
the whole war. But for the most part, we did so many different things. We towed a target for the battleships one time, and we had this 4-inch rope from our ship to this 60-ton float, and it had a not a flag, but an antenna on it. Well, we could just barely see the
battleships.
You couldn't see the ship, but you could see some of the upper rigging.
Okay.
And we could see them way off. Well, we had a guy on the ship that had a piece of 2x4 that was about probably 10 foot long, and it had a whole bunch of nails on it. And then he had a line down through the center. And whenever the battleships would fire at that target, then he'd watch and see where they hit, and then he'd mark whether they were under or over or what, and he'd radio to them. So we'd sit out there on the deck, and he'd say, "It's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's there," and this shell had hit the water. But those things were so big, if it was coming from the right here, and you looked off, if you just looked right straight through. You could see that shell come through.
Really?
2,750 pounds is pretty big. And so we towed that thing until one of them hit the line and cut it. Well, then we tried to go back and come alongside of it and get somebody on board to get another line hooked to it. Well, that sucker got, the water waves got kind of heavy, and that sucker come and started hitting the side of our ship, and the captain just pulled away from it and left it set because he said it's going to tear a hole in it, so we're going to sink.
Yeah.
And so we left it out there, and they sent a tugboat from somewhere, came out and got it. So like I said, we did an awful lot of different things.
Yeah. Well, I imagine it sounds like when you were helping with the island invasions, dropping off troops and stuff, you had a front row seat to these invasions. I mean, you were right up there against it.
Oh yeah, you've seen the ones with the front end falls down and the guys get ashore. They'd come right by us and go into shore. But we were, I guess we felt we were protected, you know. But we were there to fire in because we had to get fairly close. We were fairly accurate at 5 miles shooting, but anything over 5 miles there was a guess.
Yeah.
And we were either short, long, or otherwise. So we'd usually try and get into something like that as close as we could, and then still watch heavy artillery on the shore that could reach us. And that was, well, I seen one when we were at Okinawa. We had a bigger ship come in that had a turret right on the front of it, and the guys had a gun there that they were firing. I think it was, if I remember right, it was only a 40 millimeter. But the guys, the Japs on shore got onto that, and boy, they hit them square. And we were probably maybe the length of a football field from it.
Oh, geez.
When that shell hit, you know, well, it blew them guys over the side and that, and you knew they were killed. But, as I said, there were some hard times, along with a lot of good times, yeah. We had one time, we were down in, off of Guadalcanal somewhere, and there was a hospital ship there. Well, you know, we'd been to sea for a long time, and you didn't see many women. In fact, very, very few. And here come this boat alongside of us going on further with a whole bunch of nurses on it going somewhere. Well, we about tipped over with all the guys running to one side to see those girls go by and yell and holler. But then we did have one time, I don't know how the officers did it, but they had some of these nurses brought aboard our ship. And so they had a big dinner, and we'd already eaten, and we were going to have a movie that night. And we were in a non-combat area at the time. So we had our screen set up on the forecastle, that's the front end of the ship. And all we had was just a square iron thing with a piece of canvas nailed in it, or roped in it. And that's where we seen our movies.
This is that on top deck?
Yeah.
That on the deck?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so as soon as it got dark, well, usually as soon as it got dark, we watched a movie. Well, the movie didn't start, and the movie didn't start, and the movie didn't start. These guys were still down there in the officers' quarters with these women. Now, I don't know what they were doing, but anyway, I guess they were eating. But anyway, they finally came up. Well, there was lots of booze and all kinds of, boy, it got kind of nasty.
Yeah.
Well, when those ladies left the next day, boy, the captain really tore into us for the way we treated them.
Oh.
Well, we just weren't used to it. They didn't share with us. But yeah, you just didn't see any women out there other than the hospital ships. And those people were something else too. We carried, when we went into Okinawa, then we went north, and they put us on what they called picket stations. And we were so close to Japan then, the fighter planes could fly from there over. And so they were coming into what we call the transport area. It's where all of the ships were in and unloading supplies and cats and everything else, tanks and that. And so that the Japanese could fly all the way over and bombard them. Well, they sent us out on what they call these picket stations, and we were in between there and Japan. And what we would do is pick up on our radar the planes coming over, and we could radio into the transport area, stand by because the bogies are coming. And lots of times they'd fly over us out of range and go right on into the transport area because that's what they were after.
Right, right.
So pretty soon they got smart. If they'd get rid of us,
Oh, okay, right.
then they could go through and nobody was radioing in. And I'll tell you that's where we stayed 13 days at the guns and never got out of them because we were on call every second there. And we had one of the ships that was with us got a kamikaze plane hit it right square in the engine rooms.
Oh,
and we took 17 guys aboard our ship because they were burnt something terrible. Well, we had a doctor, but that's all. No nurses, no nothing.
Right.
And so they were asking for guys to come up to give blood. Well, I went up to give blood, but the guy died before I got to give it to him. But there was 17 of them, and I can't say for sure, but I think all of them died before we got them into the hospital ship. But it was bad. That's the only time I ever seen that many of guys hurt. But luckily, we had the planes dive on us. In fact, I got a picture where a Val dive bomber is diving on us, but he missed.
Wow.
And we had one come in and dropped his torpedo, which sometimes the torpedoes will hit and they'll skip. Well, that thing skipped over the back end of our ship. Oh, don't tell me why, but it did. It hit a wave just right, and over it went. Well, then he tried to just dive into us, and he missed us. He went over the top of us and hit in the water. So we got by again, close. But so anyway, we made it through until we got on April the 1st, when we went into the last big island. Anyway, we were all in a group again to had to transport ships with us to land troops. And this was April the 1st, April Fool's Day. And I was in the gun, naturally, but things were pretty quiet, so I was looking out that the hatch on the side, and I was looking out the front. And all of a sudden, this bomb hit just ahead of us. Well, when they hit, there's so much sulfur in that water down there, everything just turns white. Well, here was this great big circle of white. We went right through it. Well, when that happened, there was another one hit right behind us. And when it did, it went off, and it went over so close that it pushed the water up against our screws so bad that it buckled what we called our spring bearings in the engine room. Because from our engines, turbines, to the back of the ship, we had to have, our ships were so weak that we had to have spring bearings in there. Well, every time after that happened, if we got going very fast, that bearing would start getting hot. So we had a guy would drain a gallon of oil out of that bearing, and he'd dump a cold one in. And that's all he did, that was his job. Put a cold one in and take a hot one out. And that's the way we traveled if we got to going too fast. Well, when we got on the picket stations up there, we were still having this problem because that was before we'd landed the troops. And so we, one of the ships that was up there got hit right in the bow. And it just, like you'd taken a saw and sawed off the whole front of the ship. And they could still move through the water, but they couldn't go very fast because it was just like a big plank up in front, or a piece of cardboard or something holding you. So we helped get them out of the picket stations and get them into where they could go into what we called Iron Bottom Bay. That's where a lot of ships went into there to get help, and they sunk. But so we helped them into there. Well, then things started quieting down quite a bit. So they wanted us to get back to the United States or get back to Pearl Harbor and get those bearings fixed. So we took off with this one that had the front end all blowed off of it. We took off with that, and we got out of what we called a combat area, where you didn't have to worry about going to general quarters in the morning or night or whatever. And then, because they were going so slow, because they just couldn't go fast, so we left them and we went on by ourselves to get back to Pearl. When we got to Pearl, they couldn't fix our problem there, so they sent us on to the States. And while we were in the States, they dropped the atomic bomb, and we ended up never going back down.
Change the tape. You guys were back to the States to get those necessary repairs, and they dropped the atom bomb.
Yeah.
Do you remember where you were when you heard about that, about the atom bomb?
I was in Longmont.
You made it all the way back home.
Yeah. And we got we had the ship in I can't think of the name of the town, just off of San Francisco. We had it in there getting repaired, and everybody got leave to go home.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
So I got a week to go home and come back. So I was at home when they dropped the bomb.
Could you comprehend the size of this thing, or what exactly it was? I mean,
no, because we were told when we were on the way back to the ship, they wanted all our sizes for coats and that, because we were going to go to the States, get repaired, and we weren't going back out in the South Sea Islands. We were going...
For the invasion of Japan?
No. Well, we were going up to the Aleutians and come down through the Aleutian Islands into Japan. And so we were getting prepared to go into icebergs where we'd been in the sunshine down
Oh, right,
there.
yeah.
And so, naturally, when I went back aboard the ship, we went out on some trial runs out by San Francisco, and then they sent us down to San Diego. We spent about 2 weeks in San Diego, and by that time they'd made a decision that things were done enough now that we didn't have to go to the Aleutians or back out to the South Pacific. So they sent us down to the canal.
The Panama Canal?
Yeah.
What was that like going through?
Oh, it's an unbelievable place.
Yeah.
I'd like to go through it, because when we went through, we'd never been into... We hadn't. The guys that were aboard the ship then had never been into fresh water.
Oh, okay.
And when you go through there, you're in fresh water. So the skipper says, everybody, I don't care who it is, myself and any officers and all the men will turn to. We're going to scrub this ship down completely with fresh water. So everybody had to turn to. Well, and then we went through so slow that part of the trip I had to be on duty down in the engine room, so I didn't get to see it. But for the most part, I got to go through the canals and through the chutes you go through.
Yeah.
And it is an unbelievable thing.
Huh.
I can't see how the United States sold it.
Yeah.
It just, because we get stuck now, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I guess they figure we don't need it anymore. But how those bigger ships and that get through there where they only got just inches on each side, it's something. Because we were so small, we went through like a rowboat in comparison to the carriers and that,
right.
and the battleships that went through there.
Huh.
Then they sent us on up to New York, to what's the town that's hooked on to New York right there?
Brooklyn?
Brooklyn. They sent us into Brooklyn, and we tied up there, and everything that was on the ship that was not bolted or welted on, we took over and put into a warehouse. And when we got all of that off of the ship and over into that warehouse, then they sent us all on home. Well, they sent me to, I got 30 days leave. I had 30 days to get to Texas. And so naturally I came right on home, and I ended up getting pink eye. And I spent a lot of my time with my eyes well shut.
Oh, geez.
And the doctors got it pretty well done. And when I turned in at Denver, boy, the officer down there, he said, "Why didn't you come down here?" And I said, "Well, I came down here and I talked to one of the officers, and he said I'd have to give up the rest of my time at home." and I wouldn't do it. I went back and had my private doctor at home treat my eyes. And I said, I don't know what happened, but I had to come down here to turn in, and the doctor gave me some salve to put on them, and I was allergic to it. And I said my eyes swelled shut, so I had to spend a couple extra days there getting them back to where I could see before I could get down here. And he hollered to one of his men, he said, you call Fitzsimmons Hospital and get this man a bed out there, we want him in there right away. So I spent 3 weeks in Fitzsimmons Hospital.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I belonged to the DAV, and I hate to tell anybody, if they ask me, where'd you get shot? I said, well, you don't want to see. I don't want to tell them that I got to be a disabled veteran because of pink eye. But that was just one of the funny things too. So then I went to Orange, Texas. They froze my rate because I was a machinist, and they wouldn't let me out of. I couldn't get out of the service. So I spent 6 months in Orange, Texas, decommissioning seaplane tenders. And they would send us recruits just out of boot camp, and they'd come down. So in the morning we'd tell those guys what to do, and there was no restrictions on what we did then. So we'd go over town and sit in the coffee shops and drink coffee and that. We'd come back at noon and tell them what to do all afternoon, and then we'd go back over town again. Well, before I left, they had SPs and that in there, and that we didn't get to do that anymore. Things were pretty good down there for a while. Yeah. But a lot of my buddies and that were really good friends that were down there with me. So, yeah, there were some good things, and there was some bad things in that. And,
well, kind of getting back, I'm going to get back on the ship here for a few minutes.
Okay.
You know, you'd heard about the atomic bomb while you were at home, but when you guys were on the ship, were you getting world news like FDR dying and VE Day?
We had what was her name? Rose.
Tokyo Rose?
Tokyo Rose. Yeah, the ship would put that on, and we'd listen to her. She'd tell us what was going on, you know. Oh, she was something else. But we didn't have a lot of communications. But they tried as best they could to keep us informed as to what was going on. But when I said my mother got upset because I didn't write a lot of letters.
Yeah.
Did you ever see a letter that was sent home?
The censored letters?
Yeah. I'd send a letter. What do you talk about?
Yeah.
You can't say, well, we just went past such and such an island.
Yeah.
We shot at a few airplanes that go. You couldn't put that in there. They just cut it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my mom saved all my letters, and a very few. But when I got home, she showed them to me, and you hold them up, and you seen more daylight than you did writing, because they just chopped them up.
Yeah.
Well, when you wrote a letter, you put it in a box, and then the officer sat at night and read your mail. And then they just took scissors and they just cut it all to pieces. And I just couldn't figure out why I should spend my time writing a letter when it wasn't any good. Yeah. But I had a code set up with my folks. And when I got home one time, I picked out a bunch of islands on a map, and I put a code name with them. Well, then I had that code name, if they'd have caught me out to sea with that code name, but they wouldn't have known what it was anyway.
Yeah, right.
But I'd talk about Art Nelson. We'd seen Art Nelson the other day, and then I'd go ahead and talk about something. Well, they knew that I was down at Tulagi or off of the Philippines, or I was going somewhere else by that people that I went to visit. So if anybody had got the letter, they wouldn't have known what we were talking about. Yeah. But they were real strict. Now, one time we took a longboat, and I don't know why I ended up having to go. We went over, and I'll tell you, there was a pile of mail as big as this house, bags of mail that just couldn't get to the ships because the ships just didn't. They didn't bring the mail out to us. They'd take it to an island like that. If you come in there, you got it. So we got these bags of mail, and I got a picture of us throwing them up on the deck. Well, then they had a crew that took the bags and emptied them, and then they tried to separate and get them to everybody. I got 28 letters one time.
Is that right?
Oh, you look at the dates on it, and you start with the old ones first, and then work up to the more frequently. And that's, We had the craziest people. We had one kid that we always wanted him to get mail because his mother would go down and buy aftershave lotion, and she'd dump it out and fill it full of whiskey. And then she'd put it in a box and send it to us. So every time he got mail, he would pour a little bit in the top, which was about the size of a quarter, and everybody got to taste it. When we were in Hollandia, New Guinea one time, the merchant marine ships were in there bringing us supplies. And bottles of whiskey from those guys that were on the merchant marines, before they'd leave, they'd go to a store in the United States, and I mean they'd buy all the whiskey in bottles that they could buy. And then they'd come out there, and when they'd get into those islands, they'd sell them to us guys. Christmas, I was in Hollandia, New Guinea for Christmas one time, and the whiskey right there was going for $75 a bottle.
And what compare that to your monthly wage? What were you making a month, probably?
Well, I made $28 a month.
So, 3 months worth of wages to buy a bottle of whiskey.
Bottle of whiskey, yeah. But there was guys that pool their money and get one, and then they'd share it, because it's the only the only beer we had was we would get our amount of beer that we could handle, and we put it in the locker rooms on the after deck. Well, being a machinist mate, you always had a punch and a hammer, and those hinges were just put together with bolts, and we would take we had to do this at night, because I can tell you this: an officer never came on the after deck at night, because he knows if he's one that wasn't liked, he'd go over the side. And that was very easy to fall over with a push. So we didn't worry about them bothering us. So we'd take a punch and punch out the hinges, and then we'd use the padlock as the hinge, and we'd go down in there and get a few cases of beer. We didn't want to overdo it.
Yeah.
Well, then myself and a couple of the guys in the machine shop, we had the keys to the ice machines. Well, we'd take that beer and we'd put it in buckets and anything, and we'd go down and get these ice machines looked like, or the ice that we got out of there were in containers that looked very much like a popsicle.
Okay.
The ones that are big and then they slope.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you took the can over and you just bumped it, and this ice would flop out. You didn't have any problem getting the ice out. So we would go up there and get a hunk of ice and bring it back and put it in this bucket, and that's where we had cold beer.
Oh boy!
Until the officers would find out what we were doing, and then in our machine shop, we had one locker underneath one of the cabinets. Inside of there was a bucket, and it was hygienically clean all the time, and we always had it covered with rags so that dirt or nothing got in it. Well, right next to the door into the machine shop was where they pulled the torpedoes out to drain them, to put in new alcohol and more air. Well, the minute that they did that, our bucket went underneath there, and we caught that alcohol. Well, down in the after engine room, we had a coil set up in a still, because this alcohol had a pink coloring. We called it Pink Lady, and you couldn't drink it. So the first thing you had to do was to still it off and get that coloring out of there. So we ended up with 90 proof alcohol.
Oh boy!
And so we would get our bucket full, and then we spread it around. Everybody got some. Well, the first time I ran into that, we went into the engine. We had an emergency diesel engine on the ship, and the guys in the machine shop were the ones that maintained it, and we ran it. Well, the first time I got mixed up in this, we would get Coke. The only thing that we didn't have pop or anything like that, but we'd get Coke in gallon jugs, 4 gallons to a carton. And we'd buy that, and we'd have that in the machine shop too. So you ended up drinking pure Coke syrup and 190 proof alcohol. First time I got into that was in that emergency engine room. We took some down there and we dogged the door down. And well, that stuff went down good, but it come up fast. Well, I'll tell you, when you come out of that emergency engine room, you had to walk up steps, and then we had what we called a broken deck. The deck come down, and then it went on back to railing. Well, I made it just to where it come down before I started throwing up. And oh man, a headache. Oh, that stuff was terrible. But you'd be surprised how much of that stuff was.
Sure.
Well, every time they drained them, everybody wanted alcohol, you know. And you mixed it with anything you could get. And when we took stores aboard, that's supplies, the officers would stand by the holes that went down into the engine rooms, because you'd go by there with a case of something that you could just open the can and eat it. You didn't have to cook it or anything. And for some reason, that'd fall off your shoulder and go down that hole and into the engine room. Well, then we'd hide it down in what we call the bilges. That's where everything that's bad goes down into there. So we figured if they inspect us, they wouldn't crawl down in there. So that's where we'd hide our booze. And we tried to make, we tried one time to make wine, and we got a glass jug, a gallon jug, and we took all these boysenberries. So we got a whole case of boysenberries, and we'd shove them down in there, and we'd let them ferment, trying to get them to turn to wine. Well, before it ever got to where it was wine, we'd tasted it so much there wasn't any left. So we did create our own activities aboard the ship.
And officers never found out about these activities?
Well,
or do you think they knew and turned a blind eye? Or?
They'd know that we were getting beer out of that back end. Yeah. And then when we went ashore, I don't know if you ever heard of Acme beer or not. Well, that's all we got out there was Acme beer. And
doesn't sound good.
Whenever we got to where we could go ashore, they'd give you two cans of beer per person, and they never cooled it. It was always hot. Huh. Well, I didn't ever drink any hot beer till I went to England one time to visit relatives, and it got to taste pretty good after a month there. But those 2 cans, I'd take them over and I'd sell them to the guys for $1 a piece. So I'd use it to buy something else on the ship, candy bars or whatever. And that's another thing. When you got candy bars or candy or anything like that, you always held it up and looked at it, because some of that stuff had been shipped so long and was in storage for so long, the bugs would get into it. And like bread, when we'd have bread, you'd always hold the bread up and look and pick out all the dark spots.
Oh boy.
He was talking about eating. Yeah. But all the other stuff was cooked, so you didn't know whether you were eating bugs or not.
Oh boy.
But weevils and stuff would get in it. You know, you think on a ship where you were out to sea all the time, and in a day just like today, where it's just perfectly quiet, every time we turned, there was water would come over wash over the rear part of the ship, because we were so close to we were only 3 foot from the deck to the water line. Wow. So every time we turned and made a sharp turn, water would flush over there, you know. You'd think that ship should be no dust or dirt at all. Yeah. But if you took a broom down in the sleeping quarters, you could always sweep up dirt. And I never could figure out why. It was just one of those things, and that you never ate a piece of bread without checking it first, and that was just one of those things that you did. And I probably did it when I got home.
Yeah, gotta have it. Huh?
Yeah. So I thought when I got home, I don't know what I'd do when I sat down to a table that had a thing to put your fingers in, because all our cups, there was no handles on them. Huh. They were always just. And I guess if they'd had handles, the way the ship teetered and back, you learned to eat with one hand on your tray, and you ate with the other one, because if you didn't, and they executed a turn, even on a nice day, your plate would slide off and go on the deck. So you always learned to eat with one hand with the fork and the other one holding your tray, because the tables were so slick and the trays were so slick they just slide right off.
Wow. Wow.
So
So moving ahead now, you got your discharge in from Texas. Were you in
Yeah.
Texas when you got discharged? And then
yeah, I went to Galveston, Texas. They had a base just right north of Galveston where they were getting rid of the sailors and that. And so, boy, I'll tell you, when it come time to be discharged, it was hard
really,
because I didn't know what I was going to do. And 5 of us decided we were going to ship over and we were going to stay in the Navy because they were giving us a pretty good, what we thought at that time, about $300 or something if you shipped over, you know. Oh boy, that was big time money. So 5 of us walked up to sign the papers to stay in. 2 of us got to the door and turned around and walked back. And the other 3, I don't know where they went, but they stayed in the Navy. But I just didn't know what I was going to do when I got home.
yeah.
Well, I called my folks and told them that I was going to be discharged on such and such date. So they got in the car and they drove down and picked me up. I
Oh,
didn't
really?
have
Okay.
to get the train or anything.
Uh-huh.
And we went across to New Orleans and around and made a trip out of
Uh-huh.
it and back home. Well, then when I got home, I'd had no experience at anything really.
Right.
And the school district got a hold of me and said if I wanted, I could come up and take the tests. And if I could take the tests, I could get my diploma. So one of my buddies, that in fact the one that the guy I was telling you about that I went into service with, I was on the ship one day and the radio man come down. What was I telling you about?
You're talking about that buddy that you guys.
Yeah. Okay. The radio man come down and he handed me he said, I just got this through on the radio. And I thought, oh God, you know, somebody died at home.
Right.
It always looked bad when something.
Sure.
And there was this guy, and he was on another destroyer, just a little ways from me.
Is that right?
Yeah, and he came over and we got to spend about 2 hours together.
Is that right?
And that's the only time I ever ran into him the rest of the time that I was in the service. But when we got home, then we got together again, and he was the same problem I had, trying to find a job and that, and so we spent quite a bit of time together. But his eyes his glasses were pretty thick, and that's why he couldn't join the Navy. Well, evidently, when he went home about 6 months later or less, they were getting so short of guys they'd take anybody that could walk. So he got to come back in. But that was the first time I got to see him in that
Isn't
whole
that
time.
something?
Yeah. But anyway, my folks come down and got me and come home, and I just couldn't find a job anywhere. Well, I ran into some people from Estes Park, and they said, "Why don't you talk to a guy that runs the Deer Ridge Chalet?" And are you acquainted with Estes Park and Trail Ridge Road and that? You know where you come around Estes Park and you go around either way, and then the road comes together and you go over Trail Ridge?
Yeah.
Well, there used to be a big store set right there, so I went up and asked him, and I got a job. So I worked all summer up there, just working in the curio shop and working as a handyman, going for stuff at the store and running the gas station. Well, a buddy that was on the ship with me, I called him, and he came out and he got to work there too. So the 2 of us spent all summer long up there running that place. Supposedly we thought we were. And so then after that, why, I came back down to Loveland, or down to Longmont. I just couldn't find a job. So they had this government, if you couldn't find a job, they give you, what was it, $52 a week or a month, something like that.
The 2050 Club or something like that?
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. So I did that, and then I decided that I was going to be an airplane pilot. So I went out and let the government give me a ride in an airplane, and I was going to learn how to fly, and I was going to take all the lessons, and I was going to be a pilot, which was dumb because there was so many Air Force guys coming back. I couldn't have got a job anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, while I was up there, and my dad was in the diesel light plant when we moved back to Longmont, instead of being in the hydroelectric plant, he was put in charge of the diesel engine one. Well, he got to know people that worked for Fairbanks Morse Company really well. And so the guy was out, and he'd like to come to Longmont because my dad had taken him fishing up in the mountains and all that, and this was one of the big shots. And so my dad asked him one day, he said, do you have anything that my son could do? And he said, yeah. He said, I think I can get him in with our locomotive service division. And so he said, I'll check it on it, and he said, I'll let you know. Well, in the meantime, my dad had found me a job down at Center, Colorado, putting a diesel engine in a light plant. So my dad said, they're waiting for you, go down there and you can go to work. So I did. And pouring concrete and a lot of stuff. So my dad called me one day, one evening, and said, we just got a call from Beloit, Wisconsin, and you're to be there tomorrow to go to work for Fairbanks Morse Company in our locomotive service department. And I said, geez, I can't get it. So I got a hold of the boss down there, and I said, could you get me my paycheck? Well, it was a small town. So he went and he got my check. I got in the car, I drove all night. I got to Longmont the next morning, because it was a long ways down there, and I had an old 1929 or 39 Dodge, and you didn't drive 80 miles an hour there.
Right.
So anyway, I got to Longmont, and the folks says, we got you the tickets on the train, the Denver Zephyr, and we got to get to Denver to get you on that. So they took me right to Denver, and I got on that train, and I headed right for Beloit or Chicago, and then I had to get up to Beloit, Wisconsin, and I went down and talked to the boss, and he asked me some questions, what I'd done and so on, and he said, how much do you know about electricity? And I said, well, I know how to change a light bulb. And he said, that's enough. We'll send you to Erie, Pennsylvania to electrical school. So I spent a month at the plant on the test plant, the part of the plant where they test the engines before they ship them and put them into a locomotive. They run them up and down and all that. So I went in there and they showed me how to tear them apart and put them back together and all that for a month. So then they sent me to Erie, Pennsylvania to electrical school for 2 weeks. And then they sent me out on the road, and I worked for them for 8.5 years, or 6.5 years, and I traveled all over the United States.
Is that right?
And I just got tired. They'd send me a telegram or call me and say, I need you in Timbuktu in the morning. Well, I'd either catch a plane or I'd catch a train or I'd get something, and I'd have to be there as soon as I could to put an engine in service. And I just lived out of a suitcase.
Yeah, right.
And I never knew where I was going to be from one night to another.
Oh,
but they were great. I was making $125 a month, and all my expenses were paid. And the boss said, take your money out of your billfold and lay it in your pockets, lay it on the bed and count it. And he said, be sure you put in for more money spent than you did, because he said, we know you're going to be missing out on a lot. You pay for your hotel rooms, your food, your transportation, your movies, your papers, anything you get, we'll pay for, because we know you're going to miss out on a lot because you're not going to be in one town, maybe 2 or 3 days, and you're in another town somewhere else. And every Saturday morning, wherever I was at, in a hotel, motel, or whatever, there was a knock on the door, and there was a man with my check. And I worked for him for that 6.5 years, and I got married, and I had my daughter, and I just couldn't be gone all the time. I just
Sure. Oh, fair enough.
I finally ended up in Salt Lake City, and they gave me a territory there. I had all the Union Pacific Railroad from Omaha, Nebraska to Los Angeles. I had all of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad from Salt Lake City to Denver, and then I had the Union Pacific from Salt Lake clear into Oregon to whatever the big town is up there, Portland. And then I went into the Weyerhaeuser Timber Company up in Washington, and if I wasn't going anywhere else, I got on the train and went to Las Vegas. And my wife took me down to the railroad depot at night, and she put me on the train. I got a Pullman, and the Pullman guy woke me up before we got into
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. And then I stayed there all week. Friday night I got back on the train, went back to Salt Lake, got in there Friday night. My wife picked me up. I went home. I was home Saturday. Sunday she took me back down there, and back down I went again. I did this for 3.5 years up there. And if it wasn't that, I was on my way to Washington or Omaha or Los Angeles and that. And I used to go down to Kelso, California, 100 miles south of Las Vegas. I'd go down there because we had helper engines pushing the trains up over that big hill down there. And so I finally quit and came to Loveland, and ended up, one of my buddies I went to school with in Longmont was one of the engineers on the fire department here. And he said, why don't you join the fire department? And I did as a volunteer. I worked with them for 4.5 years as a volunteer. And the chief called me one day to come down, and he said, we only had 4 guys. You worked 72 hours one week and 84 hours the next. And if you came in the morning and relieved me and I went home, then the next morning I got up and relieved you. And that's just the way it went. Well, when you went on vacation, I was at the fire station until you come back. And if you got 3 weeks vacation, I didn't come home for 3 weeks.
Oh, geez.
And so the chief said, could you come down and we'll have all 4 guys take their vacation at one time, one right after the other. And he said, could you come down? And because I'd messed around the fire station. If I didn't have anything to do, I was at the fire station. I learned to run the trucks better than some of these 4 guys did. So he said, would you come down and work? And he said, as soon as this guy gets his vacation over, this guy will take his, and we'll just go through the 4 guys. And 2 of them get 3 weeks vacation. So I said, well, I'll have to talk to the guy I was working for, putting in floors and tile and kitchens and bathrooms and all that stuff. I'll have to talk to him and see. So I did, and he said, well, right now that'll work for us. He said, we're a little slow, so he said, we can get the job set up today. You work at the fire station, then tomorrow you come and work for me, and then the next day you go to the fire department, and it'll work out just fine for us. So every other day you work here. So I told the chief, I said, yeah, I would. I had 1 shift that I was on and 1 full shift yet to do, and the 4 would have had their vacations. The last guy was over by Greeley, coming this way on 34. Some kid pulled out and hit him head on, and when he did, this knee went up and hit the dashboard, and it took that bone right there and just shoved it right up his butt. Well, naturally he couldn't walk, he couldn't drive. So the chief said, could you stay on? And I said, yeah, but I want plenty of notice ahead of time when he's coming back to work so I can start looking for another job.
Yeah, sure.
And because I said, I don't know how long this guy's going to put up with me not just working every other day. So Harry would come down and walking on crutches and that, and he said, well, I'm getting better every day. And then he'd come down with a cane. Well, our trucks at that time were, you had a clutch, and you had to, and they were pretty hard to push on them old fire trucks. So I told the chief, I said, if he's thinking about coming back, I'm going to start looking for a job. And I said, if that job comes up, I'm gone. So I said, I don't know what you're going to do. And by golly, they called me and told me that Harry was out in his backyard, I don't know, digging up weeds or something, gardening, and dropped over dead with a heart attack. So I stayed on, and I was there for 30 years. 30 years
at the level of eventually working your way up to lead the department.
Yeah, well, I worked up till I was the first fire marshal that Loveland had. And that was, I wasn't the chief, but I didn't want to be the chief because he was a volunteer and he didn't make no money.
Oh, okay.
I was making a salary.
Yeah.
And as I said, I started out for $300 a month being a volunteer, or being when I first went in. And my wages got better as the years went by. And so anyway, then I retired, and now I'm just doing whatever I want to do.
Oh, good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, we'll wind down this interview then, Al. Is there anything that I didn't ask you, or any stories you can think of that you want to include on this before we that we forgot to talk about, that you want to include on this this tape? That
No. I can go back and tell you some funny things probably that happened on the ship and that, when we went across the equator.
Oh yeah, that ceremony.
Oh God, oh Jesus, oh boy, I'll tell you, you started in at the fantail and you ran up to the forecastle, that's the front, and then you ran down the other side and you just kept running around. And every time you passed some of these guys, they had a board and they'd whack you on the butt. And then they'd stop you and they'd line you all up, maybe 4 or 5 at a time, give you a chew of tobacco, and you had to bite a large hunk off of that tobacco, and you started chewing, but they wouldn't let you spit.
Oh.
Well, you know what had happened? You'd have to swallow. Pretty soon, you'd have to swallow and woke up. And then they had you've seen these dogs that run where they race and jump over stuff and they go through this tunnel? Well, they had one of those. The only thing was it was full of garbage.
Oh, boy.
And you had to, part of the deal was you had to crawl through that garbage, you know. And they saved up the garbage probably for a week and just kept filling that thing up, and you had to crawl through there with it. Well, then you had the baby, and they had him sitting there, and he had this stuff all over him right here, and you had to get down and kiss the baby. And well, I'll tell you, it got, and I don't care if you was the captain, and you had never been across the equator, you were the same as I was.
Yeah, yeah.
And those officers, the officers that hadn't gone across, they served us food. They went through, when we ate, they served the food for us, and they went through everything that we did.
I'll be done.
And then that we were classed as polywogs then. Well, then when you got through, well,
Yeah.
then you were
Yeah.
big time, you know.
Yeah.
Well, then when we'd go across the equator at any time, and we had any new guys aboard ship, then we went through them. But it got to where the doctor would watch, and if he thought some guys were getting beat too much, he'd take them in and put them in maybe one of the gun rooms or something like that, so that the guys would quit pounding on them.
Huh.
But I stood up between where we had the single stack that stuck up. There was a walkway alongside of that, and into the after deck house. Well, on that walkway, I stood up there with 2 pop bottles together, like taped together like this, and I stood there and I hollered for Davy Jones until I couldn't holler anymore. But that was my job. I had to find him somehow. So I'd holler, Davy Jones, Davy Jones, and I just had to keep looking one side or the other, and that was just part of the. And we even had skull and crossbones that we ran up the stack or up the pole, you know. And so there was a lot of crazy things that went on in that, but and it was a serious deal. There was no joke about it. There were serious times, and we were like the fire department. We used to say, we worked hard and we played hard, and that's the way we did. When we were out there and we were in a combat area, you knew that things could get tough. When we got out of the combat area, they painted the ship one time. The ship was they were headed back. And this was the trip before I got on the ship. They'd been to the Guadalcanal area, come back to get work done on it, and then we went out. They decided the captain wanted that ship painted. So they talked one of the officers of opening up the forward hull so we could get some of that juice out of there, that 90 proof alcohol. Well, they said before it got through, they were taking 5-gallon cans of paint and just dumping them on the deck and taking mopping her. Oh, I guess it just got totally out of hand because everybody that was up painting got snockered from drinking this 90 proof alcohol. And that story, when they got there, that was one of the first things I heard, because there was some guys got down and painted. They painted something on the side of the ship. Oh boy, I can't remember what it was, but it was something that the ship was a death trap, really. And when I went aboard the ship, they painted over it, but you could still see it. You know, like sometimes you paint and it doesn't cover up what was underneath there. Well, this was there. So there was some wild times aboard the ship. But
probably a good way to decompress from the serious times.
You know, it had to be. Yeah, it had to be. And when I went aboard the ship, we had a skipper that was just really good. And I stood helm watches where I got to steer, and I was smoking, and we had Captain Bland. He was just one of the best skippers we had, and we had several different ones. And I'd be up there, you know, and I'd trying to feel for my lighter, and he'd be sitting there. He had his little stool that he sat on so he could watch out in front all the time. He'd sit there most of the time, and he'd hand over his pipe and that, and I'd light my cigarettes out of his pipe, you know, and hand it back to him. That was the camaraderie that we had aboard the ship. And the officers were good. They knew that theirs was the front of the ship and ours was the back, and they didn't come back and bother us at night or anything. And we took care of ourselves. If there was a fight, we stopped it. But we just didn't have any fights aboard the ship. And we had the gunner's mates, we had the machinists, we had the torpedo men. They had all of their own little groups. And they would get together and talk about problems that they had, that this wasn't working right and so on. And they did that by themselves. But they had their own, they cleaned their own guns, and then they'd bring them out and they'd let us shoot at stuff that floated by or what. And we had to practice so many, we had to shoot so many rounds of an .06, the old guns. And then we got the old Thompson machine gun, you know, that had the round thing in it. That I loved that more than anything else, because I like that like this, or if you put it down here, you shot it, went it raised up like that, and they'd try to tell you to hold it down, you know. And if you went to shoot a guy, be sure to start at the bottom and work up, because the force of the shells going off is going to raise it anyway. So you want to really load him. So shoot at his feet and come right up him like that. So they were real good about that. And then they'd teach us about the torpedoes, and in case they ever grabbed you to help them out because they had a problem, or the depth charges. The depth charges were big. They weighed 650 pounds, the big boys. And our K gun set on the sides, that's the one they shoot out. You know, they're smaller ones. But the big boys, we drop them right off the back. They just roll off. And you set one of them shallow, boy, I mean, you got an explosion up in the air when it goes, and that's when the ship raises up. But a lot of them, you see that happening, and I know, you know, I know it's a movie, because the biggest percentage of ours, we set them so deep that the water would crown, but it'd never open up. It'd just crown, and then it'd drop back down, because the pressure would get so heavy on it, it couldn't push it up and break it open. But once in a while, we'd drop some that were blow up, and that's when the ship shook. But for the most part, why, we just dumped them off. They just rolled off, and you stood there and waited for them to kaboom. And then you rolled some more off, and every so many feet you dropped them. You know. I'd hate to have been in that submarine. Oh, God. Oof.
Through the years after the war, did you keep in touch with buddies on the ship, or go to any reunions or anything like that?
Yeah, I did. My wife and I did. We went to North Fork. We went to one back there. We went to one in New Orleans. We went to San Francisco, Seattle. I'm trying to think. There's a couple more. Over the years, we went, and I never did get to go with anybody that was around here in Colorado, which was funny, because a lot of the guys that were down there going into the Navy when I went were a lot of them were from over here at Windsor.
Oh, is that right?
But I've never seen another one. Nobody's ever contacted me or anything. But one guy, him and I, in fact, a picture I got there when we were in San Diego. We used to run around together there quite a bit. We'd go out, and I've got a picture of him and I sitting on a horse in one of these photography places, you know. But Emmanuel lives in just about 20 miles east of Sacramento, and his dad was a farmer there. Well, one of the times when I was in the locomotive business, we had a demonstrator there, and so I got a hold of him, and we had one guy with us that had his car. So when whenever we moved that locomotive, one of us guys had to be on it.
Okay.
So we'd ride in the car, and then the guy'd get off, he'd get on the train, and then the next guy'd get off. Well, I took the car, and I went to down to where he lived, and he was a little wild right then. He had some guys, they were up at a cabin, and they were really party timing. But I didn't get to stay with him very long. But when I come back, then I had his telephone number, and I got to call him. Well, his dad passed away, and he took over the farm. And he got to running a truck, and he'd haul produce into San Francisco and sell it. And over the years, he's made damn good money.
Huh.
And I talked to him every once in a
Yeah.
while. And then it was odd when we found him, or when we found each other. I didn't know where he went. And a lady called me on the telephone one day, and she said, "Were you in the Navy?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Was you on the Lang?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "My God, I found you." You know, just like that. And she hung up.
Huh.
Well, I didn't know, I didn't have anything to tell me
Yeah.
what the telephone
Yeah.
number was,
Yeah.
where she'd called from or anything. So she was in his office, in brother's office in somewhere close to San Diego. And he went down to see him one time, and the two guys were talking, and he said, one thing I'd like to do before I die is see Al Stevens. And this gal heard him. And so she started looking for me. And by golly, she found me. But when she called, then she knew she had me. So then, about 30 minutes later, the telephone rang, and it was him. And and so we got together, and we talked back and forth quite often. And so he travels a lot. He makes money enough to where he'd take 2 or 3 trips a year over in Europe or Hawaii or whatever. And so he said, "Why don't we just meet in Las Vegas?" And I said, "Okay, fine." So my wife and I went out and met them, and we got his secretary set up the rooms and everything for us and that, and got us a real good deal, because her sister lived in Las Vegas, so she knew the right people, and they got us good rooms in the hotel and a good price. So we've talked back and forth, and I need to call him. I haven't called him for 3 or 4 months, so I need to call him, because his health was, he's in his 80s too.
Yeah, sure.
And his wife and him, neither one were real well the last time I talked to him, so I'm not too sure. He hasn't called me.
Yeah.
He called me the last time, and so I haven't called him back, so I'm not sure that he's even alive. I think somebody would have called me and told me if he passed away.
Right.
But that's the only ones I've ever seen.
Is that right?
Yeah. And there were some guys I met when we were down in Texas, that I thought surely I would see, but God, they just scattered all over the United States. And a lot of them were way back east, and some of them were in Idaho, and some were in Montana, and there just wasn't any of them around close, like I thought there would be from over Windsor.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the guys that I went through boot camp were from Windsor.
Huh, I'll be darned.
And once we shotgunned out of there, they went on different ships, and because if your name, they took the first alphabets, this and then the next alphabet and on down, and they just broke it up, and that's the way you went, And you just lose track of them. And I'd like to see them once in a while, but I never did run into them anywhere that I went. And the Lang was the ship. Now those guys, I ran into some of them, because they were when we'd have our get-togethers. Then I'd see them there. Guys that I was on the ship with. But the only one I ever seen is when I went into Minnesota one time, and I had the guy's telephone number, and he lived there, and I called him and talked to him. And that's when I was demonstrating an engine for a railroad up there, and we could just never get together to go talk to each other and see each other. But I did get to talk to him on the telephone, and that was about it. But otherwise, I just never did to get any of the guys. And I'll tell you, we're dying off it so fast now. It was 1,800 a day, but now they say that's dropped. And the reason it's dropped because there isn't that many more to die. And when I went out to vote, a lady comes, she said, "Do you want to fill out a card so we can send you a thing to vote with next time?" And I said, no, because as old as I am, I'm not sure I'm going to even be around to vote next year. Everybody's standing there hurting. He said, oh, yeah, you will. But anyway, yeah.
Well, we'll start to wind down this interview, Al.
All
One
right.
last question I always like to ask is, how do you think that period of time played into your life, affected your life, just had an effect on your life, or did it, or was it just purely a period of your time?
You know, I didn't come back injured. I didn't come back shot up. I didn't lose an arm or leg or anything like that. And I feel really great because of that. And whether the good Lord was looking after me or the 21 made the difference.
Right.
I don't know what
Yeah.
it was. We had shrapnel fall onto the ship, but otherwise we weren't damaged in any way. We come close, but we weren't damaged, and I don't know why. But it's like I've told people, I wouldn't give $1 million to do it again, but it's something that I'll always remember.
Yeah. Well, is there any, as we close down this interview, any closing statement you'd like to make to
No.
close off? Okay, all right.
Not really. The only thing is, I want this because I don't want my daughter to see me.
Okay.
Because over the years, I have not talked to my relatives much about what I did. Because I knew this same thing would happen. And, you know, if I watch television and somebody kicks a dog, I get a tear in my eye.
Yeah.
And I've always been that way, and my daughter's the same as I am. And if she was here, she'd be crying right with me.
Yeah.
But like I say, I just feel so fortunate that I come home not sick like these guys coming home now.
Yeah.
I got in a problem, you know, I don't know if you know it or not, but I was picked a corn, the Grand Marshal in our Corporal's Parade. I got to be in that. And I had a lady that I thought had been mistreated. And she was in the Army. She's in the Army, and she's been over 4 times on the other side over there. And she's home now because of all the dust and stuff that she's had. She's got lung problem now. And there was she evidently went down to our Vets Club, and she talked to somebody down there, and she said the wrong thing. And talking to her, I could see where maybe was a very outspoken person, and I think she made somebody unhappy with them. So I didn't know that, but there were some people had written in our paper, in our HR line, complaining about people mistreating her. So I found out where she was at, and I got a hold of a relative, and I worked it out with the people that I wanted her to ride in the car with me. And she did. And boy, this one guy, I was out here having coffee one morning with there's about 8 of us go to coffee. They go every morning, I go about once a week. But anyway, I walked in and told him, sit down with him to have my coffee and that. And I just mentioned to him that I'd got a hold of this lady and she was going to ride in the car with me. Well, there was a guy sitting off probably just about 4 feet eating breakfast. And he stood up and come over and he pushed 2 of the guys out of the way and he said, I'm going to tell you something, boy. She ain't going to ride in that car with you because we're going to stop her. And he said, I'm one of the officers at the Veterans Club down here, and I'll guarantee you, we're not going to let that lady ride in that with you. Well, I said, I don't care what you say. I'm the one that has requested her, and as far as I'm concerned, she is going to ride with me. And he made an ass of himself in front of all of my friends, and he made me feel really, really bad.
Right.
I was just, when I walked out the door, I was upset. So I came home, and my neighbor across the street, I was telling him what happened. He does a lot of repair work on houses, and he doesn't build new houses, he repairs old ones. And he does a lot of work for policemen. And because he's done work for a policeman, and that next policeman's passed it on, so he knows a lot of the policemen because he has done work for them in their houses. He said, don't you worry about it. He said, I'll take care of that. So he got on the telephone, and he started calling the chief and on down, and the chief got his guys to call me. and say what was going on. And I just told them what had happened.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't want anything to happen when we go past their lodge down here. Both of them said, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. Well, there was 3 policemen standing at that corner, and she went on and she rode with me. And I'm glad she did, because I talked to her probably for about an hour before the parade started. And she's told me what's going on over there and that. And I'll tell you, I really feel sorry for those people over there. I really do. And are you done?
Well, if you're done, we'll shut her down.
Yeah, I don't know of anything else I can go.
Okay.
But I want this because I don't want my daughter to see it.
Okay, all right. Well, Al, I want to thank you for taking the time to sit down and tell your story today.
Yeah.
More importantly, though, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
Oh, well, thank you. When I came home on my first leave from boot camp at Farragut, Idaho, my dad went in and come walking out with his old Army uniform on, so we had our pictures taken out in front of the house in Longmont. So I had only been in the Navy for about 6 weeks when that picture was taken.
I'll be done.
But this was our ship when the picture was taken on the ship next to us, and we were either taking on more fuel, or sometimes we would get so low on fresh water because our boilers, our lines leaked, and sometimes they leaked enough that we would run out of fresh water, and they could not run on salt water, so we had to be sure it was fresh water that we had. Sometimes we would go by and take on supplies and take on water and fuel at the same time. And I was a gunner's in the gun 1, and I think that was me looking out the door right here. I'm not sure, but it could have been, because normally we went to general quarters whenever we were doing something like this. So we were at general quarters at that time, and so I could have very easily, that very easily could have been my picture or me standing there.